Rosebud was the name of that dead rich bastard's childhood sled. And spoilers for the following Scooby-Doo episodes.
Scooby meets the famous Cass Elliot today.
After unintentionally winding up in a seedy industrial neighborhood, the gang come to the aid of Mama Cass Elliot, held captive in her own recently purchased candy factory by two green monsters of indeterminate design. This is not the first time I've discussed Mama Cass Elliot or this episode in one of my videos, so I'll just give a brief summary here. Mama Cass was born Ellen Naomi Cohen in 1941 and died at just age 32 in 1974, a mere 9 months after her appearance here on the new Scooby-Doo movies. She was a member of the 1960s musical group The Mamas and the Papas, famous for their songs Monday Monday and California Dreaming. I'd like to say she was most well known for her very talented vocal performances, but unfortunately her large size is how most seem to remember her, culminating in a lot of tasteless jokes over the years, many centering on the entirely untrue rumor that she was such a glutton she died choking on a ham sandwich.
Of course, if Mama Cass had shared her sandwich with Karen Carpenter, they'd both be alive today!
Sadly, this was also the route taken by the writers of this episode. To put it in perspective, while Sonny and Cher were primarily singers, marital bantering was a large portion of their public image. Thus, instead of singing, their Scooby appearance focused on the latter, no doubt saving Hanna-Barbera a licensing fee for the use of any of their songs. On the other hand, Davy Jones and Jerry Reed were singers and each had the chance to sing during their time on the show. Or in the case of Jerry Reed, many chances. Neither sang any of their most famous hits, however. Instead, they performed songs that had already appeared as chase music in earlier episodes of Where Are You?, presumably because the studio already owned the rights. Mama Cass never sang once in her episode. To be fair, they probably couldn't squeeze a musical performance in because there was no room after all of the fat jokes.
Amazing! She just vanished into thin air.
Thin air? Cass Elliot?
In fact, if I was the Scooby writer responsible for this episode, I probably would have included a line by one of the gang making a fat joke about them not being able to squeeze in a chance to sing.
I was standing upstairs and suddenly, whoosh, I went right through the floor. I knew I was heavy, but not that heavy.
International gold swindler Sterling Smith and his partner, factory foreman Mr. Crink, dressed up as two green monster blobs to take over Mama Cass's candy factory by scaring away the rest of the employees. They also abducted Mama Cass herself. Their goal was to use the factory as cover to smuggle stolen gold out of the country. This is yet another episode centered on a couple of villains using supernatural shenanigans to frighten people away as they locate, hide, or move their stolen loot. Though in this case, it's unclear if the gold in question was obtained via robbery or deception.
This is Sterling Smith, the international gold swindler. Last month he robbed the Citibank of $2 million in gold bricks.
Smith is described by the police detective as a swindler, not a robber, which implies he and his accomplice found a way to cheat the bank out of its gold rather than simply break into a vault. This might also help explain something about the crime that would otherwise be unlikely: the original location of the gold itself. Banks are not where gold bricks are typically held. That's the responsibility of federal repositories like Fort Knox. However, it's not unheard of for banks to offer a secure location for customers to store their private gold holdings, which, while usually in the form of coins, jewelry, or small bars, could conceivably include bricks. The amount of gold in question here, however, is rather large under the circumstances. It would have made a lot more sense had the stolen gold been in the form of coins or jewelry. While I prefer not to spend too much time fixing a sloppy Scooby writer's work in coming up with a reason to explain why a bank would be holding so much gold in the first place, the fact that they describe Smith as a swindler does give them a logical way of escaping this poorly thought out premise. It's easy to see a situation where a millionaire had a sizable number of gold bricks that he was moving from one secure location to another, and he chose the city bank to temporarily or even permanently store his property. Smith and Crink could have posed as representatives of the millionaire and fooled the bank president to release the gold to them, or even swindled the millionaire directly, and by the time either possible victim realized what had happened, the two villains had made their escape. As will become clear later, transporting this much gold all at once would present its own logistical problems due to the sheer weight involved.
Okay, Cass, you can climb up now.
It's always possible that the gold was moved in several trips, perhaps just one brick at a time over a period of several weeks or months, and when the police detective described the theft having occurred last month, he may have just been referring to when the crime was discovered. Now that I've hopefully offered a good explanation for the villains being in possession of so much gold, let's dig into the rest of the design.
We're all behind you.
So that's why it's so crowded back there.
Smith and Crink used metallurgic equipment to reduce the gold bricks to powder so they could mix it with other ingredients for making candy bars. Hidden in plain sight thusly, they would then ship the product to Brazil, where they would presumably render the confectionery down to recover the stolen gold. This aspect of the scheme is both ingenious and unique, and the two of them deserve very high marks for it. However, as I'll go over later, they probably overthought the entire process and made it a lot harder than it needed to be. Looking strictly at the design, they get a 5 out of 5. Smith and Crink's plan was high reward, as $2 million in 1973 was worth $14.5 million in today's money. Using a haunted candy factory as a hideout was certainly unique, and while the method they used to smuggle the gold may have been overly complicated, it was also brilliant. Less than brilliant were the villains' outfits. Green globs. Really? That is so lazy. Or was it? When considering what their costumes were allegedly made of, these vaguely human-shaped blobs could be considered appropriate for the candy factory location.
That thing's pretty hard for something that makes cotton candy.
How does Shaggy know it makes cotton candy? That signboard is blank.
Huh? Help! Help! I can't see!
Oh, I guess it does have writing on it after all. It just appears after the machine is in use. Because it's always helpful to know what you're making after you pull the lever.
Ah, there you are. Come on, we've got work to do.
Apparently the green glob monsters are made of cotton candy. Except that's not how cotton candy is made. It doesn't come out of a dispenser like that in a gloopy liquid form. Cotton candy is made by heating sugar and spinning it. Though to be fair, that goo could be a syrup solution that gets heated and spun later into the final product. The thing is, if that is just green syrup, it shouldn't be able to stay solid like that for very long, as body heat would undoubtedly melt it. Perhaps Smith and Crink were wearing rubber suits that only looked like cotton candy syrup.
Mr. Crink!
Now let's see who blob number 2 is.
Mr. Franklin!
Well, obviously not, because as seen here, it only takes water to rinse away the villains' disguises, which means their outfits were likely just made of cotton candy syrup. Of course, in addition to wondering how the syrup wouldn't melt, one must wonder how they could see through the goop in the first place.
Huh? Help! Help! I can't see! Whoops!
This lack of visibility became apparent when Shaggy was blinded after first getting covered in the stuff, but then eye holes magically appear after he walked face first into a wall. There's no way to explain how the stuff wouldn't constantly be running into the eyes of everyone covered in it, but I suppose we'll just chalk another one up to cartoon physics. Then again, whenever someone has a pie smashed into their face in film and television, eye holes usually appear. So maybe that's simply one of the fundamental aspects of the universe that escaped Newton when he came up with his laws. Also, Green cotton candy? While it technically exists because every color and flavor is possible, green has never been a popular choice for cotton candy. It's baffling why Hanna-Barbera went with that color instead of the more obvious choice of pink. At least the producers of the second live-action Scooby film got it right. The monster design also included the special effect of floating, although as ceiling conveyor hooks were shown several times in the episode, this was one aspect of the costume that shouldn't have surprised anyone watching, especially as we see Shaggy getting hooked and flying almost immediately after having seen the villain swooping above the gang. Smith and Crink get an outfit score of 4 out of 5. Their monster design was admittedly plain, but still original and suitable for the location. It included a special effect and was scary enough to frighten even Shaggy and Scooby, despite the concept of a creature made of candy being the one supernatural foe that should encourage them to seek the monster and not run from it.
Cotton candy club.
Again, the second live-action film got it right. We were given an exact dollar amount of the stolen gold, so we know the scheme was valuable enough to make it worthwhile for the villains. But was grinding it up into powder and hiding it inside candy bars really the best way to smuggle it out of the country? Before answering this question, it's necessary to first ascertain just how much physical gold Smith and Crink needed to move. Because gold prices fluctuate daily, it's difficult to say exactly what it was worth per ounce on a given day in 1973, but most figures I found indicated it was close to $100 per ounce on average. That would make a pound of gold worth roughly $1,600. The average gold brick weighs around 27 pounds, which means each brick would have been worth a little over $43,000. Thus, $2 million worth of gold in 1973 would comprise roughly 46 bricks. Gold is generally weighed in troy ounces, which are slightly different than regular ounces, but as we're dealing with estimates and approximations here anyway, I'm not going to worry about it. The average gold brick is 7 inches long, 3 5/8 inches wide, and 1 3/4 inches tall. This equals around 44 cubic inches. 46 bricks would therefore be a little over 2,000 cubic inches, or just over 1 cubic foot. This doesn't sound like that big of a deal. I mean, Amazon ships thousands of boxes that size or larger every single day. However, it's not the size that's the problem, it's the weight.
I think we've stumbled on something bigger than all of us. Well, bigger than you kids, anyway.
46 gold bricks would weigh well over half a ton. That's not something easy to pick up and move around.
Boom! Butterfingers. Butter never spread like this!
Incidentally, I'm usually bad at math, so I've gone over these figures a lot, and I really hope I didn't make any extremely obvious mistakes. If the authorities were looking for the stolen gold and Smith was a known criminal, it stands to reason he and Crink would need to come up with an innocuous way of moving their loot. The idea of gradually moving it out of the country one piece at a time makes all the sense in the world. I just question if they really needed to bother grinding the gold into powder and putting it in the candy bars. Why didn't they just hide a single gold brick in the center of each box of Mama Cass candy bars being shipped out of the country? If they were concerned that the weight of the gold would be suspicious to anyone handling the shipping box, they shouldn't have been. Going by the few times we see them in someone's hand in the episode, a Mama Cass candy bar looks to be around 6 inches long, 3 inches wide, and probably a 1/4 inch tall. The boxes they're shipped in look close enough to be 12 inches long per side. This would mean each box would normally contain a little under 400 candy bars. As most candy bars weighed around 1.5 ounces in the early 1970s, when full, each shipping box of Mama Cass candy bars would likely weigh close to 36 pounds. This was much more than the weight of a single gold brick. So all Smith and Crink would have had to do was put a few layers of the candy bars on the bottom, stick one gold brick in the middle, pile some newspapers or other light packing material around it, cut some of the candy bars in half to hide the middle layers, and finish with a final couple of layers on top. Doing it this way would keep the boxes roughly the same weight as if filled with just candy bars, so innocent employees of the shipping company wouldn't notice anything amiss. In fact, doing it this way would do a better job of hiding the weight of the boxes containing the gold. A box filled with candy bars mixed with gold powder would obviously weigh more than a box filled with candy bars that contain no gold at all. By stuffing the inside with a lightweight packing material to offset the weight of the brick, anyone handling either type of box shouldn't notice anything unusual. Without very good cause, customs likely won't tear open or dump every box of candy to look for contraband, so this would be a reasonably safe way to transport the stolen gold. Granted, a metal detector would immediately alert authorities, but that would happen regardless of whether the gold was kept in its original brick or ground up inside the candy bars themselves. After all, if customs did get a ping on their metal detector after waving it over a box of gold-filled candy bars, what do you think would happen if they opened up the box and didn't find any obvious signs of metal? Unless they're grossly incompetent, they would hold the box for a later, much more thorough examination. Even if they weren't looking for stolen gold, a candy bar that sets off a metal detector would at least result in a call to the FDA, who would no doubt open an investigation on Mama Cass's candy factory for potential contamination, perhaps assuming pieces of machinery worked their way loose and fell into the final product. So as admittedly brilliant as this was, in the end, hiding gold powder inside candy bars is just unnecessarily silly. It's almost as though the writers of this episode were inspired by the golden ticket idea in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. It's obvious somebody working for Hanna-Barbera was a fan of the film. There are a few other questionable decisions made by Smith and Crink.
It's Mr. Franklin, the watchman.
No, I'm pretty sure that's the desk clerk from the hotel Jerry Reed stayed at in Nashville.
Gotcha now, you yellow dad! Will aim you! Put me down, I say!
Quick, we gotta rescue him!
Help! One of them's got me! Help!
Mr. Franklin? I don't believe it.
Just as I thought, a rubber mask.
I wanted to celebrate finding the real Mr. Franklin safe and sound at home.
What was the point of impersonating Mr. Franklin, the night watchman, only to fake his kidnapping later? At the end, it was revealed he was home safe all the time, so it's not like he was there at the factory to disturb the villains. I suppose the rubber mask Smith was wearing to impersonate Franklin would allow him access to the factory without raising any suspicions, but at this point the only people left were Mama Cass, Smith, and Crink. As all three of them would be expected to be there, even with the gang poking around, wouldn't it have been less conspicuous to not wear the green glob outfits inside the factory?
Okay, Cass, you can climb up now.
If I ever get out of here, it'll be strictly grapefruit. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, and in between snacks.
We saw the licorice rope support Velma, Daphne, and Fred, whose combined weight was well over 400 pounds. The Scooby writers are implying that Mama Cass by herself weighed more than half the weight of the entire Scooby gang. In real life, she weighed no more than 300 pounds at her heaviest, and probably around 240 pounds at the time of her death shortly after this episode aired.
Cass, what happened?
What happened is too many Cass Elliot caramel bars.
Uh-oh. Something tells me we have a queen-size problem.
Abducting Mama Cass was also the thing that ultimately doomed their whole operation. Her yelling from the top of the factory was what drew the gang to investigate in the first place, and it was entirely unnecessary. Smith and Crink working together should have been enough to convince Mama Cass the place was too dangerous for her to be hanging around. They could have convinced their boss to leave for home for the night by telling her they'd call the police in the morning to come investigate, giving them the entire night to finish grinding up the gold and preparing the candy for shipment. From there, they could either lie to Mama Cass that they called the authorities, or actually call them. It's not like a SWAT team would arrive and start melting candy to look for clues. A renowned swindler like Smith should be able to keep it together long enough to handle a cursory interview by law enforcement. Of course, They'd have to take care of the real Mr. Franklin during all this, but he's just an old man, and Smith and Crink are in prime physical condition.
You own this candy factory?
Right on. I'm thinking of changing the name to Sugar Plump.
I do wonder if Mama Cass was only able to buy the factory in the first place because it was allegedly haunted. She told the kids that weird things started happening after she bought the place, but it's possible that Smith and Crink were already messing with the factory under the previous owner, who conveniently failed to disclose this to their buyer. The reason I ask this question is, why didn't Smith and Crink just buy the factory themselves outright and not run the risk of anyone snooping around? For how much money this scheme was going to earn them, the cost of the factory would have been almost negligible, especially if a con man like Smith was able to find a way to cheat the original owner out of it. While the design and outfits were top-notch, the implementation of the scheme had enough questionable moments that forces me to award Smith and Crink a lifeless 2 out of 5. Their method for smuggling was needlessly convoluted. They staged 2 unnecessary kidnappings, and the only time any of the gang were in peril were the 2 times Shaggy could have suffocated because he wasn't smart enough to wipe the goo off his face. The 2 gold smugglers are still left with a respectable final due score of 3.7 out of 5.
The Sugar Plum Candy Company.
Freddie, if you're planning on having a flat tire, this is the place to do it.
In a rare example of the early days of the Scooby franchise poking fun at one of its own tropes, Shaggy seems to appreciate how often the Mystery Machine conveniently breaks down at a location that leads to a mystery.
Yoo-hoo, it's me, Cass Elliot. Help! They're holding me prisoner.
Wait a minute. The earlier shot showed Mama Cass waving outside the window, but here we see she's trapped behind bars. 2 minutes in, and we already have our first very sloppy animation mistake.
Cass Elliot locked up in a candy factory? Something tells me this place isn't as sweet as it smells.
We'll soon find out.
It doesn't even cross their minds for a second to contact the police. It's a running gag these days how many older movies would be 5 minutes long if the characters had access to cell phones. But in the case of Scooby-Doo, I don't think Fred and the rest would have used their phones, even if they had one.
Let's go inside.
I take the Fifth Amendment.
The Fifth Amendment?
Yeah, I refuse to enter on grounds that it might intimidate me.
This joke would have been lost on most of the kids watching back in 1973, but it was still clever for this series.
Wow, look at this place. I'm beginning to agree with Shaggy. It gives me the creeps.
So the gang aren't going to say anything about the 2 giant humanoid blobs just standing there. Huh.
This is crazy. There's not a trace of Cass anywhere.
Yikes!
Wait a minute. Why did they use a wolf howl? What does that have to do with candy monsters?
I've heard of all-day suckers, but an all-day gingerbread man?
I hate when this happens to characters in film or television. I'm extremely claustrophobic, and the thought of being completely encased like that really bothers me. How the hell is he even breathing?
There's no doorknob.
Maybe there's a secret switch somewhere.
Who designed this factory? H.H. Holmes? Trapdoors can kind of make sense in an old castle or mansion, but there's no way a factory setting should have one. That would be an OSHA nightmare. Then again, OSHA wasn't created until a couple of years before this episode aired, so perhaps the trapdoor was grandfathered in.
Listen, that's the same sound we heard when we came in.
It's been grinding like that every night since I bought this place.
There was a scene earlier that showed the villains grinding their gold, but the gang were never shown to hear it. I'm going to avoid being pedantic here and just assume they did hear it, but we just never got a scene of them acknowledging it.
Sandwich? Sandwich?
You chopped on me enough for one night, Scoob.
This was another episode with a very poorly engineered laugh track. I had to rely on subtitles more than once this time around.
It's gotta be one of these. Molasses machine, chocolate whipper, taffy machine.
Interesting way to spell molasses there.
Something tells me this contraption wasn't designed for such a load.
Oh, great. Now who can I get to operate those machines?
Don't worry, Cass. We'll stay and help.
You mean it?
Sure.
A candy factory of that size would need more than just the 5 members of the Scooby Gang to operate. Not to mention the training needed to run heavy machinery. Was the gang planning on making this their career now? This is a commitment, even if they're only planning on hanging around until Mama Cass can replace her foreman and the rest of her employees.
The candy seems perfectly normal.
Hold it. I want to digest the evidence.
Me too.
Those candy bars are filled with enough gold powder that they affect Shaggy and Scooby's appetites later. But believe it or not, gold is an inert metal and thus safe to eat. Despite being tasteless, it's used as a dessert topping at expensive restaurants because, quite frankly, a lot of rich people are awful people.
Awful people.
This is funny. All these crates are being sent to the same address in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil.
A common misconception held by a lot of people here in the United States is that South America is entirely Spanish-speaking. In Brazil, their principal language is Portuguese, so whenever I see anything written or spoken that's related to that country, my brain tends to want to check if it's in the correct language. Sure enough, this street address is written in Spanish, not Portuguese. I guess Velma isn't the only smug know-it-all.
This is getting mysteriouser by the minute.
Mysteriouser? The correct expression is more mysterious. Alice.
We better split up and search this place from the basement to the tower.
What tower? This is a factory, not a castle.
And now it's time to open mine.
I heard of a bottomless stomach, but a bottomless person?
Sure, just steal the product right in front of the factory owner. No biggie.
Look, peanuts.
Oh, wow! It's elephant heaven.
What kind of a candy factory leaves raw ingredients just lying on the floor like that? Then again, as a kid I worked for a really nasty bakery, so I've seen some things. How is he not smothering, being buried alive in those peanuts? This is like the Scarecrow surviving the trip down the silo in the Jonathan Winters episode.
Whoa! I wonder if Gene Kelly started this way.
For you young'uns out there, Gene Kelly was a famous actor in old Hollywood films known for his dancing skills. Anyone watching in the 1970s would have gotten the reference. Anyone watching now who thinks PlayStation 1 games are retro may not.
It looks like somebody pushed these candy canes together to hide something.
Why are those candy canes so big? I did some extremely rough math, and judging by their size as compared to Fred's height, they probably weigh at least 16 pounds each. Can they even support their own weight hanging like that? My wife decorates our Christmas tree every year with smaller candy canes, and those snap like my late grandmother's hip bones.
Somebody sure is trying to hide whatever's in that tower.
What tower? This building clearly has no tower. First the peanuts piled on the floor, now marshmallows. If the green globs wanted to shut down the factory, why didn't they just call the health department?
Darn! Why couldn't we have landed in a mountain of grapefruit?
Look, that must be it.
Look at the size of that padlock.
I'll bet they stole it off the front door of Fort Knox.
Somebody call Speed Buggy.
That That's better. Now try to keep it down, will you?
Hey look, yet another source for my childhood misconceptions of how lighter than air is supposed to work.
Look at me, a regular Willie Mays.
Where did the bubble gum go?
How come no matter where we go, there's always a tower and it's the creepiest room in the building?
What tower?
Mr. Franklin!
Yipes! We're buried in chocolate bunnies!
More product just casually left on the filthy factory floor. The animators obviously want us to think the chocolate bunnies were in that cart, but there's no way they would have all fit. Even Willy Wonka was more concerned with not contaminating his chocolate.
Shaggy, are you all right?
I think so.
Heavy.
Look who's talking.
Let's see what it does to this key. Wow! When they say metal grinder, they mean metal grinder.
Well, I hope that key wasn't important.
Hey, you should eat more. Food gives you energy.
I wish that were all it gave me. Why wasn't I born a skinny boy?
I think I'm getting a bellyache.
Bellyache?
Oh! Our luck's changed, Scoob. It's raining popcorn.
Popcorn?
Oh, if we only had some melted butter and salt.
Not 2 minutes ago, they established that Shaggy and Scooby had upset stomachs and didn't feel like eating. Now they're both excited over popcorn?
Hey, Cass, won't you join us?
My grapefruit diet, remember? It's some kind of purple gunk, and it's got my arm!
If you've seen as much anime as I've seen...
What a great idea!
I got it from a girdle ad.
Let's try running.
But which way?
Is now really the time for your Fred impression, Shaggy? Also, why is Scooby trapped now?
What a sweet operation. How else could I smuggle $2 million worth of candy bars out of the country?
You could always give them to Shaggy to eat and then fly him to Brazil.
You realize the implication here is that they would have to painstakingly render down Shaggy's to recover the gold, right? Like, every time he took a dump, it'd be in a bucket that some poor guy in Brazil would have to toss into a forge to burn away the remains of any number of pizzas, hamburgers, and 5-foot-tall sandwiches. I had a cousin who once swallowed one of my mom's favorite earrings, and she did not have a fun time sifting through the contents of his diaper with a fork. I really hope she threw that fork away.
But those are covered with whipped cream, marshmallow, and chocolate syrup.
Not so loud. If you don't tell me, I won't tell my stomach.
I would like to take a moment to thank my new Patreon members and apologize in advance if I mispronounce any names. Lane Lindonsky. Thank you, Lane Lindonsky. Kim Dixon. Thank you, Kim Dixon. Amisha Fernandez. Thank you, Amisha Fernandez. Elisa Major. Thank you, Elisa Major. Ron Can. Thank you, Ron Can. Thank you to everyone helping support my channel. It absolutely means the world to me. If you'd like to help, there's a link to my Patreon page below, but please only join if you're comfortable doing so. New members get a personal thank you in the next regular video I upload after they join, as well as credits in each regular video for as long as they remain a member. I'm trying to work the kinks out of allowing patrons early access to my videos, but it's been a bit bumpy getting there. If you recently joined and you're not mentioned here, it's likely because your membership notice came after this was recorded. Rest assured, I'll get you next time.
The famous Dick Van Dyke joins us today.
An aimless drive through the country ends with the gang stopping at a carnival. There they meet the owner, famous film and television actor Dick Van Dyke, who needs their help to save his business from supernatural shenanigans. Dick Van Dyke has had a long and storied career as a stage, film, and television actor going all the way back to the 1940s. It's impossible to say what he's best known for because he's been known for doing so much. He's a recognized national treasure, and at the time of making this video is easily the oldest of all the surviving Scooby-Doo guest stars. He's lived over 3 times as long as Mama Cass. Though not superstitious, I'm a little nervous making this video, hoping I don't jinx things. I'd hate for the Grim Reaper to be watching this on YouTube only to slap his bony hand to his scully face after realizing he forgot all about Dick Van Dyke. Then again, a view is a view, and it can only help my analytics. Here, Dick Van Dyke is the sole owner and currently sole operator of what's referred to as a carnival, despite actually being an amusement park. Carnivals are generally built to travel and don't stay at one location for long. That's why most of them don't include boardwalks, large roller coasters, and tunnels of love. So from here on out, I'm calling it an amusement park.
Just give your tickets to the man at the gate.
Hurry, hurry, hurry. Have your tickets ready for the greatest wonders on earth. See the ape man who looks like an ape. See the bird who looks like a fish. See the ticket taker who looks just like Dick Van Dyke. He is flexing his powerful muscles. He is preparing his superhuman body. He is trying to get his zipper up.
This episode is almost a repeat of the first time Don Knotts appeared, wherein a well-known TV celebrity switches costumes, trying to fool the gang into thinking his establishment had more employees than just himself. The biggest difference this time around is instead of swapping disguises to scare the teenagers into a confession, Dick Van Dyke just wants them to stay and enjoy his park. In both the Mama Cass episode and this one, it's never explained why either celebrity was running a business unrelated to their careers, with Mama Cass running a candy factory and Dick Van Dyke an amusement park. Both had been working steadily in entertainment at the time of their appearances here, with Cass doing television and shows in Las Vegas, while Van Dyke was starring in another eponymous TV series.
It was all a part of my plan to make you think your carnival was haunted.
But why?
So you'd sell it to me cheap.
The villain this time is the amusement park's former strongman, who was never given a name. He wanted to sabotage...
Sabotage? How? When?
Dick Van Dyke's business so he could buy it for himself at a reduced price.
Instead of just another strongman, I'd be the owner of the carnival.
That's his entire motivation. He's not out for revenge. He's not looking for a hidden treasure or underground resources. He's not planning on reselling the property to a higher bidder. He just wanted his own amusement park so he could be a strongman and the owner. To that end, the strongman dressed in glowing paint and used elaborate props to make it appear as though the amusement park was haunted. He even used his specialty, strength, to terrorize Shaggy and Scooby.
He's popping the balloons!
Wait a minute. An ex-employee of an entertainment venue is trying to ruin his former boss by dressing up as a ghost to drive away customers and all the other workers, as well as attempting to kill Scooby by popping balloons. Why does that sound familiar? There's not much more to say about the strongman's design. If he succeeded in everything, at best he'd save a little money becoming the owner of an amusement park that was rumored to be haunted, which means he'd have a hell of a time finding anyone to work for him, even if he could convince the public it was safe to return. At worst, he'd get caught and put on trial for fraud, intimidation, vandalism, and attempted murder. This scheme just wasn't worth it when there had to have been any number of other small amusement parks or even legitimate carnivals out there for him to attempt to purchase. No explanation is given as to why it had to be Dick Van Dyke's amusement park, like it had once belonged to the strongman's family or there was a girl working there that he liked. I'm giving the strongman a 1 out of 5 for his design. The plan wasn't original, and the money just wasn't worth the risk. I don't want to say that the strongman's costume was worse than what Carl the stuntman wore, but come on.
Come back! We found the ghost!
So?
So? You win a cigar.
Where do you think you're going?
To get your cigar.
It's literally the dude just wearing glowing white paint. No mask, and in his regular clothes. Dick Van Dyke should have been able to easily identify him as his former employee. I suppose white paint is better than nothing, but come on. In the Scooby-Doo universe, the three main ghost special effects are glowing, flying, and transparency. So at least the strongman's outfit had the saving grace of having one of those worked into its design.
Do you think the camera captured me?
The ghosts are nothing but luminous cloth.
Worked by wires and springs.
It's all a fake.
Technically, there is some transparency as well, but from what we're told at the end, it's all wire work and nothing the strongman was wearing. Thus, anything with that effect would be considered a prop and not part of his disguise.
Hey, look, kids! The hand wants us to follow it.
Maybe we'll learn why the carnival is haunted. Let's go. Right.
As for how frightening his outfit was, I'd say only about half of his appearances to the gang and Dick Van Dyke could be classified as such. The first time he appears, it's as a ghostly disembodied arm which beckons toward the group, and most of them follow it. That's the opposite of both being scared and being smart. It's the Scooby-Doo version of getting inside a creepy guy's windowless van. This isn't the first time that a strongman has appeared in Scooby-Doo, but it is the first time one appears as a ghost. So while I'm tempted to give low marks for the villain using a disguise that pretty much fails at the disguise part, there were special effects and it was at least unique. So he'll get a neutral 2.5 out of 5 for the outfit. Let's look at the strongman's attempts to spook the gang and Dick Van Dyke.
Oh, great! I finally got a customer. That'll be a nickel a throw.
Where'd the arm go?
I don't know. It disappeared.
We'd better find it.
You're not kidding. That arm owes me $27.
At 5 cents per throw, that would mean the arm threw 540 balls. There aren't even 540 balls on that table.
I'll do the cooking. 2 hamburgers, double order of onion rings, double order French fries, couple of buns.
For being such a famous glutton, you'd think Shaggy would know that is not how you cook either French fries or onion rings.
We better check those hamburgers. Now the whole grill is gone. Let's get out of this place.
Why would the villain bother rigging a grill in a random concession stand to disappear under the floor? Was he really thinking that far ahead?
Where? It's your imagination, Scoob. There's nobody in that mirror but us.
Oh, we're back to gaslighting again, I see.
And when we finish blocking the entrance, we'll bolt the back door. There's no bolt.
I've seen a lot of signs over the years directing people to a back door, but this must be the first time I've seen a sign identifying the back door. That is weird, right?
Hey, Scooby, that's high enough! Yipe!
The strongman's armpit is right there under Shaggy's nose. That's the moment when it should have been obvious the ghost was just a sweaty big guy wearing paint.
Man, your paw is sure cold and clammy. A ghost!
I had to look this one up, because I've never seen a roller coaster type ride with covered cars. Apparently, there used to be an old-fashioned amusement park attraction called a Caterpillar, which featured a canopy that would close during the ride to make passengers experience everything in the dark. Very few of these remain operating in the world. The strongman first starts by getting Dick Van Dyke and the rest to follow him to a ball toss stand where he steals a few prizes. Then he messes with Shaggy and Scooby by hiding their food, followed by scaring them in the Hall of Mirrors, ripping the bolt off a door they were trying to secure, and intimidating them by showing how strong he was. Finally, they end up holding hands in a caterpillar ride. These are all essentially harmless pranks. Then things ratchet up a notch with something we haven't seen in a while. Attempted murder.
Well, sorry the ghost spoiled your fun.
Hey, we're flying! He's popping the balloons!
As happy as I am that the producers finally remembered that it takes helium to make a balloon float, I'm annoyed by how that balloon was clearly not attached to anything when the strongman let it go.
I got a triple scoop!
I got this.
I usually wave away stuff like this as cartoon physics, but come on. In the actual show itself, Shaggy and Scooby fell for 90 seconds. It would take only 8 seconds to fall from the top of the Empire State Building. Even accounting for how editing often creates timing discrepancies during action scenes, Shaggy and Scooby fell for far, far longer than 8 seconds. That scene should have ended like this. The balloon event is followed by the strongman launching Dick Van Dyke dozens of feet through the air after slamming his head against a heavy bell at the top of a High Striker game. The actor was approaching 50 years old at the time, and at the very least should have suffered a severe concussion, let alone possible brain damage or death. This gets chalked up as attempted murder as well.
Come on, Daphne. We have to catch the ghost for Mr. Van Dyke.
Mr. Van Dyke might want a picture to remember this day.
God damn it, Daphne.
You see what I see? A ghost!
And do you see what I don't see? Daphne!
Get his license number.
Where are you, Daphne?
Are you okay?
Daphne then gets briefly abducted and roughed up by the strongman in a bumper car pileup before Dick Van Dyke and the gang stumble upon the villain's hideout under the park.
Let's see who's making those noises.
Or what?
Shh! Something's behind those motors. It's the strongman. He said he left my carnival.
And that's how the strongman is uncovered. There's no elaborate Freddy trap, no frantic chase involving Shaggy and Scooby inadvertently stopping the villain, no unmasking. They just follow the sweaty grunts of the bad guy working out, and the mystery is over.
What happened?
Well, that puts him on ice. Ice cream, that is.
Good work, Shaggy.
You too, Scooby.
There's nothing keeping the strongman from climbing out of that ice cream and strangling everyone. Can you imagine if real life worked like that? I'm a robber running from the police. Oh no, I got sticky, so now I have to surrender. Yes, technically, we did still get a final chase with the strongman pursuing Shaggy and Scooby, but this was hardly an acceptable conclusion. The strongman was covered in ice cream, not trapped in a well or knocked unconscious for the police to come and take him away. In fact, we never see the police arrive or any mention of summoning them. I like to think the strongman climbed out of that ice cream, briefly considered turning the teenagers and the middle-aged TV celebrity into putty, then just grunted, decided it wasn't worth it, and just went home to shower before looking for another job. I'm giving the strongman an operation score of 3.5 out of 5. A lot of his attempts to scare fell flat, but 2 attempted murders proved he wasn't playing around. And he rightfully realized at the end that owning a small-time amusement park just wasn't worth all the hassle. This leaves the final villain featured in the new Scooby-Doo movies with a due score of 2.3 out of 5.
Studies show that artificial stimuli provided by carnivals relieve tensions of everyday exigencies.
Huh?
She means it'll help us forget about some of the haunted houses we've been to.
Remember that scene in the first Scooby-Doo live-action film when the gang finally got sick enough of Scrappy's bullshit that they dumped him on the side of the road? Eh?
Pepperoni pizza and soda pop? Wow!
Scooby!
Keep the windows up! Or get Scooby a harness for riding in the Mystery Machine. I've got one in my car! Worst dog owners ever.
That's strange. The carnival seems deserted.
Gosh, I wouldn't know why the place was empty, what with those creepy statues at the front gate that looked like they came straight out of a Dario Argento film.
We're lucky if we have the price of admission.
Yeah, let's see how much we have.
This is another one of those somewhat meta moments in Scooby-Doo where the show briefly touches on one of the questions fans have had for years. How do the gang afford living expenses when they spend so much time driving aimlessly around the country getting embroiled in mystery after mystery? In some depictions, they've been shown to be living off wealthy family members or taking odd jobs here and there. But without a reliable source of income, even paying for gas would be a problem. Especially since the month this episode aired, the world saw the beginning of an embargo that quadrupled the cost of oil.
Oh, forget it, kids. The tickets are on me. These are for the rides, these are for the attractions, and these are for the food.
That's mine.
I'm no economist, but if your business is struggling to survive, maybe giving stuff to your customers for free is bad?
That man looks like Dick Van Dyke, too.
I guess his relatives are working here as employees.
This wouldn't be the first time Dick Van Dyke gave a family member a job. It's probably not a good idea to Google all of his relatives' career choices, though.
Just one ticket to see the strongest man in the world.
Would you like to see the strong man?
I'd rather see whoever was responsible for setting the background plates on this episode. They clearly used the wrong one here for the gang, considering where they were immediately prior to this, right? Hey, background plate guy, you had one job. Probably. This was Hanna-Barbera. They might have had the poor guy handle catering, too.
Why is your carnival so unpopular?
People say my carnival is spooked.
Haunted?
He didn't say haunted, he said spooked. Maybe the background plate guy was responsible for scheduling dialogue retakes, too.
I know it's ladies first, but not this time. That hand could be leading us into trouble. A man should lead the way.
Yeah, that's technically sexist. But at least it wasn't mean-spirited like all the other times that happened in earlier episodes.
Boy, can you imagine anybody going after a ghost hand, like on purpose?
Oh, so that's the kind of operation Dick Van Dyke is running. You'd think the place would have more customers, ghost or not.
Let's see if it's open.
It's open.
Yeah, and there's nobody here, so we don't have to pay, Scooby.
Dick Van Dyke gave you free tickets to everything, Shaggy. You already don't have to pay. Also, wow, the production mistakes are incredible. Here the animation cell numbers made it on camera. And also what looks like hair? Did Clarence Thomas work at Hanna-Barbera before going to law school? I assume the floor leading to the funhouse entry was rigged, and that's what Scooby is reacting to, but they forgot to animate it. We see obvious holes in the wooden flooring leading up to this moment, but Scooby is not only not walking on the same surface, but also appears to be floating above whatever those knobs are.
Oh, I'd love to probe the scientific intricacies of this feat of legerdemain.
What'd she say? She said she volunteers.
You smug know-it-all.
Well, we might as well enjoy the ride. That's what we came to the carnival for, right?
What? Roller coaster. Yuck. Wow. Wow. That's right.
No more Scooby snacks.
No more Scooby snacks? Oh, no.
Worst dog owners ever.
You and the ghost.
Relax. You know, I don't even think there is a ghost. I think it's someone trying to scare us.
This is the 24th episode of the new Scooby-Doo movies, and there were 25 episodes of Scooby-Doo Where Are You? In his one and only appearance, 15 minutes before the end of the episode, Dick Van Dyke already knew what Fred, Daphne, Velma, Shaggy, and Scooby should have known from almost literally everything they've experienced before in the franchise.
Just warming up. I'll hit the bell in a minute.
Over 30 years ago, 5-year-old Mark Zuckerberg found his inspiration for Meta while watching a syndicated episode of Scooby-Doo.
He'll remember this day without a picture of you.
Well, it'll only take a moment.
Women. What am I saying? I'm one of them.
1970s.
And it's coming from under the boardwalk.
Under the boardwalk, boardwalk.
Couples come in together and hold hands and come out engaged.
No kidding. Will you let go of my hand, Scooby? We're just good friends.
No snark. That one legitimately made me chuckle.
It's Mr. Van Dyke.
And it's Velma's voice coming out of Daphne.
Look at those costumes.
I see the strong man may have spent some time in the South.
And as a reward, I'm making you part owners. You're all going to help me run it.
I'm a firm believer that almost every Scooby series takes place in its own timeline in its own universe. As this is the final episode and the last we see of this iteration of the Scooby Gang, it's pleasant to know their futures are secured as part owners and operators of their very own amusement park.
No kidding.
You mean it?
Of course.
Did Shaggy just go through reverse puberty?
I'm in charge of the Tunnel of Love.
Oh, maybe somebody will take me for a ride on it.
And that's my ranking of the final set of villains from the second season of the new Scooby-Doo movies, shown here along with the ones from my previous videos. Covering this series feels like I ran a marathon, which clearly is the closest I'll ever get to that sensation. As requested by a lot of you, I'm planning on cracking open the Scooby-Doo show next, but there may be one Scooby-Doo video coming before then, so please tune into my channel for that one. Well, I guess you don't tune in to a YouTube channel. Is tuning in even a thing anymore with most televisions? Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. If you'd like to help support this channel, there's a link to my Patreon below, but please only join if you're comfortable doing so. And for what it's worth, rumors of me choking to death on a ham sandwich would be entirely believable.